Eleanor Ray lived on the northern edge of Winslow, where pavement gave way to gravel, and mailboxes started rusting by mid-May. Her house was over 70 years old, wooden walls that creaked in the rain, a boiler that needed a good smack to kick in, and floorboards that groaned like they remembered every step of her late husband. Everything carried the weight of time, and of Dan. Every morning followed the same quiet routine. A mug of microwave-warmed coffee, 2 pills for blood pressure, 1 for the thyroid. A to-do list scribbled in thick black marker on a yellow sticky note. Check the mail. Water the ficus. Feed Raymond. Raymond was her overweight cat, completely indifferent to who lived in the house, as long as his bowl stayed full. Dan had died suddenly 3 years ago. Stroke. Gone in under 3 minutes. There were no screams, no scenes, just a cold that never really left her bones. She quit her job as a nurse 3 weeks after the funeral. Didn't even give notice. Just left a note in the break room, written on a paper towel. 2 words. I'm done. At first, Eleanor thought it was just a phase, that she was tired. But days turned to months and she never came back to life. Not because she couldn't, because she didn't want to. Nothing was calling her back. The house had 6 rooms. She only used 3. The kitchen, her bedroom, and the bathroom. The rest stayed closed, collecting dust. Dan's old typewriter still sat on the desk in what used to be his office. In the living room, his favorite chair waited silently, the one that creaked under his weight when he read the Sunday paper. She hadn't moved any of it, not out of sentiment, because it just didn't matter anymore. Sometimes she imagined what her life looked like from the outside. In the heavy silence of each day, she could hear her own breathing, like it belonged to someone else. She only turned on the TV at night just to hear voices. Any voices. Her son Joel lived in Seattle. When Dan passed, he flew in for 3 days. Cried in the kitchen. Said something like, "You have to stay strong, Mom." Then flew back. He rarely called. Wrote even less. He had a new life. Maybe he believed his mother was managing just fine. And in a way she was. A year ago, she tried therapy in a nearby town. One session, a woman in a salmon-colored sweater talked about grief cycles, inner critics, and self-compassion. Eleanor watched the clock. She never went back. There wasn't tragedy in her days, just a quiet kind of emptiness. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that dulls. She didn't cry at night, didn't complain. Her heart wasn't broken. It just didn't sync with anything anymore. One evening, she stood at her kitchen window, holding a mug of cold coffee. Outside, a field stretched empty and pale with frost. On the sill lay a junk mail postcard, something about a meter reading. And suddenly, Eleanor didn't feel pain. She felt nothing, as if someone had turned off a light inside her and never came back. She walked to the fridge, opened the door. Inside, a bottle of water, a wedge of cheese, and a single cup of red yogurt. She stared at it. Strange, she thought. Dan always preferred green. That night she couldn't sleep. Not from worry, but because it hit her. She wasn't living. She was waiting. For what, she didn't know. At sunrise, she took down the old calendar from the wall. Last year's. Faded corners curled. She hung up a new one. No notes. No scribbles. Not to plan anything. Just because. Maybe it was time to change something. The first overdue notices arrived back in the fall. Eleanor ignored them at first. Then came the second one, bold red letters across the top. Urgent. Delinquent property taxes. She sat with the envelope in her hands, the late afternoon sun slipping quietly out of the sky. The numbers didn't lie. A few more months like this and she'd lose the house, the only place where every floorboard still remembered his voice. The next morning, she tied her gray hair into a neat bun, put on a clean button-up, and headed into town. She wasn't looking for a career or a new chapter. No passions to discover. No dreams to chase. She just needed a job. Something simple. Something paid. Something they'd give to a woman her age without questions or speeches. She found it. Janitorial work at Iron Leaf Insurance. Small office on the third floor of a mid-rise downtown. The place smelled like plastic, burnt coffee, and air conditioning. They hired her on the spot. The last cleaner had quit without a word. Her first day they handed her a ring of keys, a black company t-shirt, and a rolling cart that squeaked like it was in pain. She nodded through the short orientation, saying nothing. Eleanor had learned long ago, silence usually works better than explanations. The office was a maze of glass walls and white plastic panels. Every computer was newer than her car. Every employee younger than her son. They passed by her like furniture. A few gave a nod. Some muttered a quiet thanks. No one made eye contact. She had her route. Kitchen, restrooms, hallways, then the dreaded open space. 40 desks, ergonomic chairs, monitors glowing like they never slept. That's where it felt worst. She wasn't a person there. She was a smudge on the image. An interruption in their bright, buzzing world. The women wore sleek pantsuits and AirPods. The guys had tattoos and $6 coffees. It was like they all lived in a parallel timeline, where people over 50 had already been deleted. The worst of them was the receptionist, Jada. Perfect teeth. Instagram smile. A walk like she knew everyone owed her something. Each morning Eleanor nodded politely. Jada smiled back. One of those smiles that never touched the eyes, then let her gaze slide down to Eleanor's shoes, then her hands, then her face, as if scanning for defects. One day, while Eleanor was bent down wiping under a desk, Jada leaned toward a coworker and whispered, "I didn't know we hired ghosts." She laughed. Quietly, but not too quiet. Eleanor didn't say a word. She never did. She walked home in silence every night, not physically tired, but worn down by the slow erasure of her existence. She didn't expect respect, but she hadn't realized how deeply invisible she could become. Each night she'd empty her pockets and count her paycheck, $3.10 a week, just enough to keep the tax collector off her back, buy Raymond his food, and fill her pantry with canned soup. She didn't complain. She just kept cleaning. But something inside her cracked a little more with every shift. In the crumbs under keyboards, in the soggy napkins, in the cold coffee spills on linoleum. She saw the outline of a truth. Her years, her stories, her memories. None of it mattered here. Not in this world of Google calendars and curated youth. Still, every morning she showed up. Not because she wanted to, because no one else was going to save her life. The basement of the office building smelled like damp cardboard and old paint. The light was yellowish, weak, and flickering. This was where they stored things no one needed upstairs. Broken chairs, faded banners from long-past campaigns, boxes with no labels. For Eleanor, it was a quiet place. A kind of peace. No one came down here. No one noticed. One rainy morning, as she creaked her way down the stairs, she spotted a new box shoved against the far wall. It was dusty with peeling tape and a faded label. Archive 1985 to 1989. She didn't know why she reached for it. Maybe to escape the present, even for a moment. Maybe because there was nothing better to do. Inside, yellowed newspapers, glossy magazines with ridiculous haircuts, and stacks of old files someone once tried to organize. Mixed in were greeting cards, holiday wishes, thank you notes from clients, typed letters. Her eyes landed on one of them. Thick paper browned at the edges. Blue ink. A little shaky. And at the bottom, his name. John Griffin. The world stopped. John Griffin. Her first. The first person she talked to about death, about music. The first boy she ever split an apple with, 3 pieces because he said, "One for the future." The first she walked away from. Back then it felt like the right thing. Dan was solid, dependable. John was a dreamer, not ready for real life. She wanted something safe, and she chose it. Eleanor sat down right there on the cold floor, her back against the wall. She held the letter as if it might break in her hands. She didn't open it right away. She just breathed. When she finally did, her eyes traced the lines slowly, swallowing the words the way people swallow pain. "I don't know if this will ever reach you. But if it does, I want you to know, you were never a mistake. You were my spring, even if now it's winter." She read it 3 times. Then again. then pressed it to her chest. Her heartbeat was slow and hollow like sound in an empty room. After that, she started returning to the box every day. After work. Sometimes just for a few minutes. Sometimes for an hour. In that basement, with the smell of dust and forgotten things, she unraveled herself, thread by thread. She wasn't searching for John. She was looking for herself. Did she regret it all back then? No. She did what felt right. They were young. Fear of the unknown had drowned that love, like it had drowned many others. But now, holding that letter, she didn't feel shame. She didn't feel guilt. She felt seen. Someone somewhere remembered her not as a mother, not as a widow, not as the woman who mopped floors, but as a girl, person, someone once dreamed with. That evening, she placed the letter in her kitchen drawer, under a box of napkins. Not to hide it, just to keep it close. The next day, she brought a small flashlight to the basement, a thermos of coffee, pillow to sit on. Not out of impulse, out of need. She wasn't escaping reality. She was returning to a part of herself she thought had been buried. And every old page, every faded postcard wasn't just nostalgia. It was a reminder that once upon a time she laughed so hard it hurt her cheeks, that she used to be fearless. Maybe, just maybe, some part of her still was. It happened on a Tuesday, just like any other. Cold coffee, stepladder to the storage room, silence in the basement. Eleanor sat on the floor with John's letter in her lap, the one with the line about spring. She knew it by heart, but every time she read it, it felt like someone gently placed a hand on her shoulder. No judgment. Just, I remember you. She didn't hear the door creak open, didn't catch the sound of heels, didn't get the chance to close the envelope. Oh wow. The voice was tight, cynical. You really are crazy. It was Jada, leaning against the railing, same smug expression Eleanor saw every day. But this time her eyes held something else, contempt and satisfaction. Sitting in the dark, reading love letters from the 80s? Are you serious? She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Every word cut through the air like a knife. Then came the phone. Snap. She took pictures of the box, the letter, Eleanor's face, and walked off with the kind of strut that belongs to people who never doubt their power. Within half an hour, everyone knew. Side glances behind monitors, whispers in the hallway, and then lunchtime, the break room. As Eleanor passed by, a guy at the table, not even looking up, said, "Hey, someone check the basement. The ghost lady might need company." Muted laughter. Nameless. Like bullets without fingerprints. She didn't drop her gaze. Didn't speed up. Just kept walking. But for the first time in years she didn't swallow the shame. She gathered it like fuel. At 4 p.m., she walked up to reception. Jada was typing with the air of someone who thinks busyness equals virtue. When Eleanor stopped in front of her, Jada didn't even look up. "You have something to say?" Delivered with bored indifference. Eleanor paused. A few seconds, then calm, clear. "Yes." Silence. "I've cleaned your mess for months. Watched you smirk, act like I don't exist. I let you. That was my mistake." Jada finally looked up. No smile this time. "But here's what you don't understand. You can call me crazy, old, pathetic, it doesn't matter. Because I've lived. I've buried love. Raised a son. Held the hands of dying patients when no one else would. And you? You've posted coffee selfies and scheduled your Botox." The room stilled. Two women near the printer froze. "One day when you're my age, if you're lucky, you'll remember this. Not because I embarrassed you, but because you'll realize how little you actually knew." Eleanor turned and walked away. She knew there'd be no apology. People like Jada didn't do that. But she didn't need it. For the first time in years, she didn't bury the pain. She named it. Out loud. After that, the office didn't mock her. They avoided her. Not with hate. With fear. Because now they saw something they didn't understand. Dignity that didn't ask to be noticed. The accidental messes in the kitchen stopped. So did the hallway whispers. No one touched her. But no one came near either. She got home late. Raymond was nowhere in sight, curled up under the radiator. She took off her coat, put the kettle on, didn't bother with the lights, and then she realized she was okay. Not happy, not light, but whole. The loneliness was still there, but this time it was hers. Not a sentence, a choice. And that silence, it wasn't emptiness, it was peace. The window across the street, second floor, perfectly level with hers, always caught Eleanor's eye in the evenings. At dusk, a warm light would flicker on, and inside a narrow room lined with bookshelves, a man would sit. Always the same man, still composed. A gray sweater, silver at the temples, broad shoulders. He played. Not for show. Smooth, precise, steady. It was an old piano, muted but clear. Eleanor could hear it, even with the windows closed. Sometimes it was Chopin or Mozart. Sometimes jazz, soft and slow. Other nights something simple, childlike even. Like a flashlight through fog. They never spoke. Just a nod now and then. No words. No gestures. But over time it became a ritual. After work. After tea. After Raymond the cat jumped up onto the windowsill and curled into a ball. She'd sit in her chair and wait. Wait for the man. For the light. For the music. Then one evening, stepping out onto her porch, she noticed a white envelope on her windowsill. A small stone held it down against the wind. Inside, sheet music. At the bottom, handwritten in a slanted, careful script. "This piece is for you, Arthur." Her hands trembled. Not because it was romantic, but because it was real. No expectations. No pretense. Just someone saw her. She didn't know how to respond. She sat at her kitchen table for a long time, then finally pulled out a blank sheet and wrote, "I don't know what you played yesterday, but it reminded me of oranges and my mother's Christmas cake. This is the most honest thank you I can give. E." She left the envelope on her windowsill. No stone this time, just tucked under a flower pot. A reply came the next day, then another the day after. And so it began. They didn't use phones. Never crossed the street. Never knocked on each other's doors. They wrote letters. Like kids. Like teenagers. Like something out of an old movie. Each note revealed a little more, but never too much. She wrote about her work. About Raymond. About how fall smelled different on Fridays. He wrote about the books he was rereading. About an old guitar collecting dust beneath the piano. About the wife he had lost, who never truly left his heart. First it was once a week. Then twice. Then every day. He didn't push it further. And neither did she. It was like breathing. Soft. Constant. No obligations. No betrayals. And for the first time in years, Eleanor found herself waiting. Not for a phone call. Not for a paycheck. Not for something tragic or dramatic. Just for morning. For a new letter in the mailbox. Sometimes it was a poem he remembered from school. Other times a question. "Do you like rain on Sundays?" And she would answer, "Yes, if there's someone to share it with." Snow fell slow and silent, like the world was trying to tuck everything under a soft white blanket. Outside the window, the street lamp glowed dim, catching flakes as they floated past, glimmering, almost warm. Inside Eleanor's house, the quiet was deeper than usual. Not peaceful, hollow. Winter quiet. At 3 in the afternoon, the lights blinked once. Then again. Then went out. The power was gone. So was the heat. The stove. The kettle. The internet. She stood in the kitchen with a cold mug in her hands, watching Raymond curled under a throw blanket on the chair. The silence wrapped around her like a sheet. Even the fridge had stopped humming. That was the strangest part. Then the crunch of snow outside. First she thought just a neighbor. But no. No one walks on foot in this kind of cold. When the knock came, it startled her. She moved slowly as if underwater. It was Arthur. On her porch. Holding a thermos and a folded wool blanket. No fuss. No explanation. "I figured you could use this," he said, voice low, a little raspy, familiar. She nodded. Not because she had words, but because none were needed. They sat at the kitchen table across from each other. Between them, a single candle floating in a bowl of water. The flame danced in her eyes, tiny, alive. Arthur poured the coffee. Strong. Hot. Slightly bitter. "This is strong," she said, a small smile. "So are you," he replied. She didn't look away. Years ago she might have. Back then she would have dropped her gaze. Hidden behind caution, afraid to lose again. Afraid to hope. But not now. Now she was here. With him. And she didn't need to be defended from life anymore. Her hands didn't shake. They weren't clutching letters or holding on to ghosts. They simply rested on the table, open. Sometime near dawn the power flickered back on. A click from the ceiling light. A hum returning to the walls. Neither of them moved. Because there was tea. And a candle. And warmth, not from the heater, but from being seen. They didn't talk about what it meant. Or what came next. They just stayed. Neither wanting to leave. In that kitchen were two people. Without youth. Without illusions. Without masks. Just not alone. Just alive. Just home.